Do you remember the bad old days of British Leyland, when it looked as though car manufacturing in this country was doomed to end in turmoil, with millions of man-days lost in strikes and millions of pounds lost through poor productivity? The view at that time was that British Leyland's chances of survival were 5-1 against. So who could have predicted that out of so much conflict could evolve a success story? Well, above all, Rover could. Somehow it managed to climb out of the mire of discontent and transform itself into a world-class company, with a product and a workforce so attractive that it was bought by one of its biggest rivals, BMW. But their intention was not to dismantle the company or to move it, but just to keep it the way it was. Rover, of course, is a famous mark in the best of British tradition. The first Rover was built in 1904 at a cost of 100 guineas. Today's Rovers cost from £5,500 for the Mini to over £40,000 for the top range Rover. They're sold in 150 countries and achieve a sales revenue of £4.3 billion a year. So how then did Rover achieve the impossible and turn this into this?
For the answer to that, you've got to go back to the mid-80s. Up to that time, the history of industrial relations in our company and others was not ever so good. We decided what we needed to do was to understand what our own people really thought about us and about the company. So we carried out an attitude survey. And frankly, we weren't really prepared for the response that we got. What our people told us was that they were interested in the business, that they did care about the business. They wanted to be involved in solving the problems of the business. So a lot of old stereotypes were knocked apart. I think going back to the mid-80s, few people would have thought that there was that power and potential within the organisation. And really it was from that point onwards that we recognised the potential and the value for investing in our people.
So what did you have to do to become an investor in people?
Our programme has been to give everybody, every single person in the company, those skills that are necessary. Problem-solving skills, communication skills, team-working skills. When people are part of the same team, then they feel obliged to everybody else in the team to make a contribution. We've got rid of a lot of unnecessary differences in workwear. We all dress the same in Rover nowadays. There's no managers in pinstripe suits lording it around the place. It's just our names, there's no titles. And we're trying to ensure that we've got an environment where everybody feels as though they're part of the same team. In the last attitude survey we carried out, 95% of the people in Rover said they were proud to work for Rover. I think that's fantastic.
Rover Group consists of 5 distinct business units, and it was decided that each one would apply separately for the Investors in People standard. In fact, Investors in People worked so well for the purchasing department that they're now keen for all suppliers to Rover Group to achieve the standard too.
We already insist that our suppliers achieve BS 5750, the nationally accredited standard of quality management. We're now moving on to encourage those same suppliers to achieve the Investors in People standard. And the reason that we're doing that is that if you consider that 75% of the costs of Rover Group, some £3 billion, are spent outside our organisation, then if we're to achieve a world-class standard, then they have to do likewise. It's not good enough for our suppliers to pay lip service to being an investor in people. We require them to be measured against a national standard. And it's not about having an extra certificate on the wall or a gong to say that you have it. What's important is that you see the benefits flowing from being an investor in people. Now, from my training budget of £350,000, we've generated sufficient savings to fund a whole new Rover model. In other words, from a few £1,000s by investing in people, we've achieved millions. Now, it's no wonder that we'd like our suppliers to achieve a similar result and achieve a similar benefit.
But what about the workforce? Many people working at Rover today can remember a time at British Leyland when it was the done thing to be anti-management, anti-company. Has that really changed? Well, perhaps one recent story illustrates that change most of all. It was Christmas time and the works were closed down. The phone rang in the security office. It was a United Nations driver under shell fire in war-torn Bosnia. He needed urgent technical assistance for his Land Rover Defender. In the old days, the response might have been,
"I'm sorry mate, there's nobody here over the holidays, you'll have to call back in the new year."
but that wasn't what happened.
I didn't want to let down the United Nations, I didn't want to let down Rover Group. After all, they do encourage initiative. That's what investing in people is all about. After checking through technical information, manuals, I rang him back and he did get back on the road. Maybe a few years ago, a security guard might have said more than my job's worth. Since Rover has invested in its people, it's made jobs more interesting, exciting, and you never know what will happen next.